Okay guys, so we dropped the engine in yesterday and I was originally going to wire this car like on the engine stand, but I decided that's probably not a good idea because with the lengths of the wire and everything, I can be more precise with the lengths of my wire running to the ECU. Okay, so that was a bit of an idea I had to wire it outside, but this is going to be better. And I thought that at this point in the build, I thought it would be a good time to show you guys how to wire up the wasted spark. Okay, I know I made a video a while ago saying I would show you guys that, so that's what I'm doing. Okay, so we made this bracket a few videos ago for the Yaris coils. Okay, these are just pretty cheap coils. I think they're 30 bucks a piece or something like that. They're not that expensive. You can find these on, wherever. And they each have 4 pins, but you only use 3 of them, okay? And we're gonna wire this up in a wasted spark setup, okay? So the firing order of an inline 6 is 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4, okay? So I made a little diagram here on a whiteboard to make it kind of easier to show you guys. So let's take a look at that and I'll kind of give you an idea of how we're going to wire this. So you basically only need 3 triggers to fire this, okay? So here, I wrote it this way because it makes it a little easier to visualize how it works. Okay, this is your firing order: 1, 5, 3, 6, 2, 4. So you're going to be firing 1 and 6 at the same time, and then you're going to be firing 5 and 2 at the same time, and then 3 and 4 at the same time, and then the cycle starts over: 1 and 6, 5 and 2, 3 and 4. So when number 1 is on the compression stroke, number 6 is on the exhaust stroke, and so on. 5 is on the compression, 2 is on the exhaust, 3 is on the compression, 4 is on the exhaust. And then once it starts over, 6 is going to be on the compression and 1 will be on the exhaust. And then so on. 2 will be on the compression stroke, 5 will be on the exhaust, 4 will be on the compression stroke, and 3 will be on the exhaust. So you're going to be firing it, there's going to be an extra spark during the exhaust stroke. So the engine doesn't care that you're firing a spark during the exhaust stroke. So the disadvantages of this type of setup is that you can't adjust individual spark. Like if you wanted to delay a spark or advance a spark in one particular cylinder, you really can't do that. But this is like a stock application. This is not like a performance situation where, we're running EGTs and we know that one cylinder is a little hotter, so we're going to retard the spark in that one cylinder. Kind of like in the Mustang, it's all sequential, and I can do that. Okay, I can retard timing in one cylinder. If one cylinder is not getting the fuel that the other ones are getting, whatever. You kind of get the idea that you have more adjustability. So in a stock application, it's not necessary. It's much simpler to wire, much more simple to wire. We're going to have, coming out the harness here, we're only going to have 4 wires that go to the ECU, okay? One's going to be 12 volts, 3 will be signal wires, and we'll have a ground that we're going to ground to the head, okay? That's it. So one ground will come from all 6 to the head, and then 3 wires to fire the coils, and 1 wire for 12 volts. Okay, so you're gonna need some wiring. We got some wiring here. This is some 14 gauge wiring. This is 20 gauge. Okay, I'm gonna use 20 gauge for the signal. Okay, the signal doesn't really draw any current. It's just a signal to tell the coil to spark. The 14 gauge is going to be used for the ground and the power. Okay, pretty much just the power. I'm gonna run some like a separate ground. I don't know what I'll use. Maybe if I can just find some extra. I was thinking of just doing like a stud, mount a stud here, and then come off the head to the stud, and then ground each coil to that. So we'll start wiring it up. We're gonna run the number 1 and number 6 are gonna be wired together, and then 1 wire is gonna go to the ECU. these two, 2 and 5, and 3 and 4, okay? So let me go ahead and start doing that. We have our connectors here. We've got pins. We've got the little, we have to insert these pins into the connectors. I just dropped one. So that's, you know, I'm not gonna really show that because you know, you're gonna have to come up with some crimpers. You're gonna need some wire strippers, whatever you have, and start wiring it up. Now, the way it's wired up, you know, you can look it up online, but you basically, you have this wire here is your ground on this end. This here is your 12 volts. Your second pin in is your trigger, and the fourth pin is not used. I'm sorry, not the fourth. Your third pin is not used. The fourth pin is 12 volts. Your first pin is ground. Your second pin is your signal wire. That's telling this coil to fire. Okay, the third pin in there, you know, like some stock ECUs use that for like feedback to the ECU to say, yeah, I sparked. So it's like for check engine lights or like a misfire. We're not using that on a standalone. Okay, I'm using ECU master standalone. You don't use that. We're not worried about that. So it's just 3 wires, okay? So let me get one wired up, and I'll show you guys, I'll plug it in, and then I'll show you guys how it's gonna look. All right, so we've got the first one wired up. So I wanted to show you guys exactly how you're gonna be doing this. Okay, so like I said, this is the signal wire. So we're on number 2. So this is the first, this is the second, so that's the signal wire, as you can see. That focuses, okay? So you're coming out of there, and we're gonna connect it with the butt connector to number 6. So that means 1 and 6 are gonna be fired at the same time. So from here, we're gonna run 1 wire to the ECU. Okay, so we got them all wired up, all the signal wires, and you can see they're jumpered together, 1 and 6, 2 and 5, and 3 and 4, okay? And what I did was I kind of staggered them, okay? Because we're gonna be adding a wire onto the end of it, and when we go ahead and bundle this all together, you don't wanna make them the same length. You don't wanna put all of them in one spot, okay? Because when we use the, you know, like this braiding we're gonna use on there, that stuff, we don't want there to be a big ball in one spot. So you kind of want to stagger them out, okay? So now I'll run the wires from here through the firewall, and then we'll mark them once we get it in here. The ECU is gonna end up landing somewhere in this area. So we'll give ourselves plenty of room, you know, to be able to hook it up later on. Okay, so we finished up the signal wires. They're all right here. And I kind of left a little bit of length here to be able to tie it up maybe down to this ground wire. And then coming into the car, I marked each one, what they are. 3 and 4, 2 and 5, and then this one is 1 and 6, okay? And I left enough room so that we can reach to the ECU. All right, so moving on to the power wire, the 12 volts that's gonna be feeding these. The wiring harness I purchased from Speedway Motors, it came with a wire built into the harness for your ignition, okay? So you can run your ignition off of that wire. It's pretty thick. I think this is like, this might even be 12 gauge. It's pretty heavy duty. It's 12 or 14, I'm not 100% sure, but it's pretty thick. And you can run that to your coils, and you can also run your injectors off of that. I ran the same wire running the injectors and the coils on the Fox body for a long time, until I started running into issues where I was running more dwell and I needed more current. So I separated them and ran larger wires. You can do that too. Either way, it doesn't matter. You know, for right now, I'm just gonna wire it to the coils, and then I'll decide later on if I wanna wire the injectors. I may wire the injectors onto another accessory. So anyway, we're gonna go from pin number 4 on each one, and we're gonna run all of them together to this pink wire. Okay, so we got the power wire done. All those are connected. What you're gonna wanna do typically is you don't wanna try to run all 6 into one connector, one butt connector or crimp connector. It's not really practical because it'll be too thick trying to fit it in there. So you can run 3 into one and then come out with one, and then 3 into this one and then come out with one, and then those 2 will connect to your ignition wire, okay? Unless you have like a really big crimp, but it's just not practical, and this is way more neat, and it'll stay inside, you know, once we bundle it in the wrap. It'll be way more, it'll look more aesthetic. It won't look so bulky, okay? So, and then I like to use this little Velcro just to kind of keep my wires kind of where I want them as I'm going. And then, you know, we'll push all this into the firewall once we're done. So, okay, so we got power, we've got signal, now we need ground, okay? So I'm gonna put a stud here so that I can run a wire on the back to like a grounding point on the head. And then I'm gonna run these 3 to a stud, and then I'll run 3 coming back up to the stud. So there'll just be one wire breakout. There'll be a breakout of a ground coming here from this side and one from this side, and that's it. All right, guys, so if you made it this far, congratulations. You just wired up wasted spark on your Datsun or your 2J or pretty much any inline 6. So we got our grounds all hooked up. All 3 wires are hooked up that we need. The grounds are here, and I used blue wire on this one because I ran out of the other wire, but it's all the same gauge and electricity doesn't care. So I mounted a stud here, like a nutsert, and then ran a ground to the head. Okay, that's very important. It's gotta go to the head because the spark plug is grounded to the head. So you can't ground it to the battery or anything like that. It's gotta be grounded to the head, okay? And then eventually I'm gonna run another ground wire from, I have a ground wire from the alternator to the head, and then I'm gonna run another ground wire from that point, from this point on the head, all the way back to, I have a ground bus right there. So that'll kind of complete the circuit. But yeah, you definitely want a good clean ground on the head. And that's it. You hook it into your ECU, and you know, there's some things you got to do to set it up in the ECU to work. But other than that, this is the basic wiring. This is all I wanted to cover in this video, is the basic wiring, just to get you started, okay? So yeah, that's that. I'm gonna wire loom all this and make it look pretty. But other than that, we're waiting on the intake, the exhaust, and then, you know, we'll do a few other sensors. We got to do an O2 sensor, an intake air temperature sensor, the map sensor. We're going to be using the internal map sensor on the ECU, throttle position sensor, and that's pretty much it. Fuel, and you can start this thing. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you learned something. And yeah, like I said, I'll make another video on wiring up the batch fire injectors. Okay? All right, that's going to do it. Check y'all later.